It seems like when you stop drinking, the big emotions just surface all at once when we stop using alcohol to numb. And I think one of the most challenging emotions is anger. It's almost scary. Like it feels like it makes you could lose control. And then you almost feel guilty for even being angry.
Anger has always been, and it seems, especially in recovery, anger is always seems to be the emotion that gets me past fear.
If we learn how to respond to our anger rather than react in anger, it's it's a whole different, it's a game changer in your life. I know it has been in mine. I can't say it's for everyone, but I know it has in mine.
Anger, I think, so ubiquitously gets defined as like a bad thing. That's a bad emotion. And again, where my school of thought is there are no bad emotions. Everything is how we are interpreting that emotion, how it's communicating a need to us, and how we are reacting. What anger is a high arousal emotion, right?
Welcome to Through the Glass Recovery Podcast, where we believe that connection is the opposite of addiction, vulnerability is the antidote to shame, and personal growth is the key to loving your sober life. We're your hosts, Julie Miller and Steve Knapp. Join us in conversations with people from all over the globe about how you can thrive, not just survive, in a life without alcohol.
Welcome to Through the Glass Recovery Podcast, everyone. We're so happy you're here. We are here hanging out with Lester and Mike today. We are going to talk about anger, which is such an important topic, especially for folks in early recovery. But if we're honest, anger is something we all face. We all have to learn how to deal with, and that's what we're going to talk about. So it seems like when you stop drinking, the big emotions just surface all at once when we stop using alcohol to numb. And I think one of the most challenging emotions is anger. It's almost scary. Like it feels like it makes you could lose control. And then you almost feel guilty for even being angry. It's complicated and it's overwhelming. So we're going to talk about anger today, how to deal with it in healthy ways. So you don't have to try to avoid feeling it, which we all know never works. Before we jump into it, we're going to have these guys introduce themselves so our listeners can get to know you a little bit. And Lester, I'm going to let you kick off the intros because Lester has been here with us before. So how you doing?
I'm doing well. My name is Lester Vaskin. I'm a man in active sustained recovery. My recovery journey started several years, but I chose the path of abstinence December 14th of 2021. So coming up on 4 years of abstinence. And I live a life with my girlfriend, Miranda, and my dog. I am a recovery coach. I'm not practicing at this moment. I'm also a Colorado certified peer and family specialist as well.
Awesome. Well, really happy to have you back. Really happy just to get to hang out with you. It's been quite a while, so good to see you.
Mm-hmm.
And then we've also got Mike joining us. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for the opportunity to talk with you guys. I've been looking forward to it. So I like the way Lester framed his journey in terms of abstinence and recovery. So I'm going to just start there. My attempts at abstinence started about 10 years ago. Abstinence did not work for me. I find recovery to be a very different animal, and I really embraced recovery a little over 7 years ago now. So my own applause. Thank you.
Yeah, heck yeah.
I am very proud of that, honestly. So I appreciate it. I am the founder of Curevine. That's my private practice. And what we do, I connect people with different issues, everything from addiction, other diseases of compulsion, family members in addiction, other mental health issues, basically with like the best resources I possibly can. So sometimes those are other private practice professionals. Sometimes those that might mean an inpatient treatment situation. It really runs the gamut. I'm technically an interventionist. I don't do a lot of that in practice now. I do mostly counseling, family addiction specialist, And I have a wife, Carrie, and a son, William, who is about 7 years old, and a 6-month-old named Camille.
Amazing. Cool.
Mhm.
Well, really happy to have you here. Really excited to get to hang out with you. Steve and Mike have hung out before, so I finally feel like I'm part of the cool kids. So, yeah, thank
You're
you guys
welcome,
both.
Julie.
Thank you guys both so much for being here. So we're gonna kick off this conversation about anger, and there are this is no holds barred. Let's talk about the real stuff because I think anger gets a little scary and a little dark sometimes, and I think that's the stuff that people are a little afraid to talk about. But it's also the stuff that we need to be honest about. So I guess let's just open the floor. What comes to mind first when you think about dealing with anger and doing it without alcohol? Either
Before
one of
I'm
you is
going to let
welcome to. Oh, go ahead.
one of them go, I'm
Uh-huh.
going to focus on if anyone is out there that's angry right now, that you should hit subscribe, follow, go to the website. See what I did there?
I do.
Yeah, yeah.
Smooth.
It is.
Use your anger and just smash the subscribe
Smash
button
the subscribe button.
with all your anger. Absolutely.
And if you're listening on Apple or Spotify and you haven't checked out our YouTube channel yet, all of these are on video now. So come and check us out. Leave us a comment. Subscribe there too. And thank you all for listening. Okay, now go.
The floor is
Lester,
yours.
Mike. Anger.
So I've had a long relationship with anger. It was something that was predominant in my household growing up because I do come from a household of alcoholism. I feel through my journey of recovery, I've come to know that anger is really a secondary emotion. We're taught this, and it did make sense to me when I first heard it. I didn't believe it. But as my recoveries developed, I wholeheartedly understand what they mean by it. So growing up, I was always in trouble, always yelled at, always punished, and I just felt like it was something that was natural in life. I just I was raised that way. I thought it was just a part of life for so many years to a point where I became a very angry person and it exposed itself in a lot of ways, a lot of physical anger and violence through my anger because I couldn't control it. And it it's caused me a lot of trouble in my life. I've got almost 20 years incarcerated because of my anger. And everything, it was always a fight, it was always violence, it was always because I just couldn't control it to a point where I would lash out. And even while incarcerated, it's a culture. Anger, violence is a culture, and it just was bred into me. And up until my recovery here, I just didn't understand it. I couldn't control it. I didn't think I could control it. I have a lot of different beliefs about it now, and I'd like other people to open the floor right now, and we can discuss some of the ways that I deal with it today. Um, but yeah, that's my take on anger in life.
Mhm.
So my most insightful take on anger is that I wore a red shirt to symbolize anger. And that's about as adept I am at often interpreting and expressing it. This is about at the level of a teacher choice. No, I think honestly, part of why I was excited to talk to you guys about this was because I'm excited to explore this topic and learn a little bit more about my own anger. Because I'll be honest, as someone who I feel okay saying I'm very connected with my emotions. And that's a product of my recovery, for which I'm really, really grateful. I am very intentional about recognizing and processing them. And when this topic came up, I as I gave it thought, I realized, this might be the emotion about which I'm least in touch with myself. And I think well, I'll just say one reason primarily, I think, is that anger, when we see it, I think we identify anger by seeing it. And that's not a good way to identify anger, right? Because anger manifests in so many different ways. Like, it can be the dude, throwing over bar stools or whatever and punching holes in the wall, or it can be the quietest man or woman in the room sitting there seething in resentment. So it's a really, really difficult one to parse. Like, Lester called it secondary, and I think in a lot of situations it is a secondary emotion, because for myself, or many of us, it is more accessible than other uncomfortable emotions. It's like the least of the, it's the least uncomfortable of the uncomfortable emotions for many of us. So we can get there, whatever, if we're comfortable with the outlet. Having an open mind to how anger presents itself for us personally, and in observing other people, is really, really important. And honestly, I really am coming into this hoping to gain some insight, even like for myself, just discussing this with you guys. So
I love that. That's my favorite when the best conversations happen when we all show up with the intention of learning a little bit more. I love that. I think what I'm hearing you two talk about is kind of what comes to mind for me. I would hold anger in. I was like, the like super mom, right? So super moms aren't supposed to ever act angry or look angry or even feel angry. So I'd keep it all inside until it hit the point of rage. And then I would lose my shit. And I feel like, Lester, what you're talking about when you talk about like the actual outward expression of anger, for me, I didn't just come into a conversation calmly and be like, I'm feeling really angry right now. Like, when I got to the point where I was ready to express, or like I could not stop myself from expressing anger, it came out in a full-blown explosion. I was throwing things, I was slamming doors, I was breaking stuff. It was like, and that didn't happen often. It happened enough that I guarantee you my kids are traumatized, and it was not at them. It was at anything else. So, I mean, it wasn't like I was physically hurting them. I wasn't screaming and yelling at them. I was just like, I mean, I'd slam doors and break things, and I tried not to let them see it. But I mean, you can't not hear mom throwing a temper tantrum in the bedroom because she can't handle her own emotions, right? Which is mortifying. Like, I hate even talking about this because there's so much shame wrapped up in that, but it's true. I had no outlet. I didn't know how to deal with it. I didn't know how to talk about any of it before it got to the breaking point, and I just completely lost it. And so I think that that's kind of what you're talking about, Mike, is like you can be feeling anger, but not showing it or expressing it. It's just all inside. And it's like, it will eat away at you. And then, Lester, you're talking about the outward expression that wasn't just a very calm, I'm angry, but it was like a rage. And I think that switch for me, the scariest part of anger is going from keeping it all inside to the switch that flips and it turns into rage. And rage to me is terrifying. I think I've actually hit the point of rage twice that I can think of, maybe 3 times since I quit drinking, which is, I mean, that's been 4 years. It's not like it happens often, and I'm obviously much better at expressing things now. So, but it's still like it gets to the point where there's so much in there that I can't express, and then I hit rage, and rage is the scary part of anger for me.
Next level.
Yeah, like, I hate talking about this because it makes me feel like a failure, like, honestly. And I know it does. I know that I'm not a failure, but it's so ingrained in me from like childhood that you don't act angry.
You just be
And
happy.
just be happy. Don't get mad. Don't be angry. Whatever. Keep it all inside. Be a good little girl. And I'm sure that, I don't know exactly what it is for boys, but if I ever got angry, then I got in trouble because I didn't know how to let it out other than to yell and throw a fit. So, yeah, I mean, we all learn from an early age, keep that inside until, at some point I just couldn't anymore. So I don't know. I have a weird, really uncomfortable relationship with anger.
I think that's where, not every man, but I know me, I was expected to react outwardly, especially in the cultures that I grew up in. So, as you said, as a girl, you were taught to act as a girl. For me, I was taught to react as a man. And when I say anger is a secondary emotion, I can count on one hand the times that anger has just been because I was mad, right? My anger typically comes from feel of fear, disappointment, disrespect, that I don't know how to embody it other than be mad at it. I just didn't know how to. And in my growing up, if you were any of those things, disrespected, hurt, you reacted to that. And so it came out in a physical way. It wasn't as in my childhood, being a man, you weren't allowed to express yourself unless it was in a physical manner.
Sure.
I couldn't talk about my feelings. I couldn't talk that I was upset. I couldn't talk that I was hurt. They didn't want to hear it. It was, they were too busy doing what they were doing in life. You bottle it up, bottle it up, bottle it up to that point where you just explode. And it came out in those ways. And then later in life, as incarceration happened, it had to react immediately. If you were ever disrespected, ever anything, otherwise it got turned on you in that
So
culture.
it becomes survival at that point.
It becomes survival, because if you don't react to disrespect, then you get the punishment. So
Well, and in a way, it was survival even in your family growing up,
yeah,
right? Like that's how
absolutely.
if you don't want to be looked down on or made fun of or treated badly or whatever, then you have to react with anger. So it sounds like
Absolutely.
anger has been your survival mechanism for a long time.
It had, right? And I think recovery has opened my eyes. When I used, whether it was alcohol or substances, whatever it was, I didn't have a barrier. I went from this to this immediately. There was no stop and think. I didn't think rational. Recovery, I'm able to think a little more rationally. Doesn't mean I never get angry, no. But it means that I don't have to react the way I did while I was under the influence. And I think that's the biggest difference today in my recovery is I get to think about it, and I get to think about it rationally, and I get to understand more about it and the way I feel and the way I grew up. I get to think about these things and encompass them to where I don't have to react to my anger. I get to sit in it and feel it and maybe choose a different path.
I don't think the goal was ever to not get angry. And I think that's something else I had to learn was I thought I was just not supposed to get mad about things. And I think that was another just an incorrect belief that I had. You talked about like it's not that I don't get angry anymore. We have to get angry. It's a necessary part of being human. We just need to not lose control, and we need to learn how to respond in a healthier way. Anger is a helpful, healthy emotion, and I always thought it was just bad and to always be avoided at all costs. So
So
For
I
me,
come from a place of thinking that my philosophy is that no emotions are bad.
Mhm.
And I mean, I know it sounds sort of like cliche therapy speak, but like I genuinely believe that in our evolutionary DNA, that emotions serve a survival purpose for us, right? And anger, I was sitting there thinking while Lester was talking, I was trying to think if there are any other emotions that are maybe mischaracterized more than anger, and I'm not sure, um, because anger I think so ubiquitously gets defined as like a bad thing. That's a
Mhm.
bad emotion, and again, where my school of thought is there are no bad emotions. Everything is how we are interpreting that emotion, how it's communicating a need to us, and how we are reacting. What anger is a high arousal emotion, right? So we go from like the trigger of it to that evaluation, physiological like arousal stage. That's what I was saying, but you know what I mean. And how we are going to respond to it with our behavior, whether that's on this side of the spectrum and it's suppression, or it's this side of the spectrum and it's repression. repression or acting or aggression, whichever side of the spectrum it's coming out on. That period where we individually, I wouldn't even necessarily say decide how to respond to it, because I don't think it's at that level of consciousness. I think it's very, very much subconscious. But I think we're all kind of wired differently based on our brain and based on genetics, and certainly based on our upbringing, like Lester talked about. Which I can relate totally to what you said, Julie. I can relate totally to what you are talking about as well. That conditions us in terms of how we are going to view anger as a valid emotion, and how we're going to, behave as a result of it.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of my anger I turn inwardly instead of outwardly. I mean, I never got physical, ever. It's just not, that's not a part of who I am. It was never a necessary thing. I'd get yelling and screaming. I would focus inwardly and be angry that I didn't do something, angry that someone didn't do something for me that I expected them to do. So it would be a combination of a bunch of resentment and my failure to act in a way that would, be a version of self-respect. And so for me, I would say it more or less turned into, I would say, almost like a depressive type thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like it would create some anxiety, but it never often got to be an outward expression of things. And so, I mean, there were times where I was afraid of, if I got really, I was angry enough that Julie, like you spoke about the rage thing. I was angry enough that I never said anything about it, but I was afraid to hurt someone. And the hurting someone scared the living fuck out of me. Because if it turned into that, who knows what would happen? That red light never came on, if you know what I mean, like the rage light. But I kept a lot of it in. I kept a lot of it in, and it turned into disappointment, and it turned into me feeling like just shit about myself. And a lot of that was fear-based. Fear of what would happen to me if I expressed that anger. Growing up, Dad was a pretty calm person generally. And so it just wasn't something that I ever saw expressed in a way that would be healthy either. Like not an example of, here's anger. This is what you do with anger. Like Lester, you were taught, here's anger. This is what you do with anger. Right. So the opposite is, I didn't, get to see it. Also didn't do a lot with it. Today, I do a lot differently with it. It is still very inwardly focused. Julie would know. It doesn't take me a lot. It takes me a lot to get angry. It's got to build up and build up and build up pretty good. I'm also a lot better at communicating. So it doesn't have to get that far unless I'm angry at myself. And
I think that's a great point. I believe that for me, 8 out of 10 times that I start to feel anger build up inside of me it's a result of expectations, because I put unnecessary expectations on myself or other people. They're not living up to what I think they should, so I get angry. They're not acting the way I think they need to act, I get upset. But more importantly, in recovery, I find myself more angry at myself because I'm not living up to what I think I should be living up to. And then that's that sort of internal resentment, right? I shouldn't be, I know better. I know better than to put expectations on myself, but I still do it. I still do it every single time.
I'm
And
way better at not giving expectations to other people than I am of giving them to myself. I'm great at giving myself expectations and holding myself to a really high standard and doing that, but I'm pretty great at not not giving out expectations so I don't have to feel the anger. Right? Like if I don't have expectations of other people, I free myself of being angry at them, like I expect them to fail. Or if they do, it's no big deal. The very basics of recovery, you learn that expectations lead to resentment, which is true. You can't just live your life without expectations.
I try telling people all the time, an expectation is a premeditated disappointment. You're setting yourself up for it.
Right. And I have to learn how to deal with disappointment properly.
That right there, because you can't go through life never expecting anything of anyone. And I think that we fall into a trap there because I remember hearing that in early sobriety too, where they're like, expectations lead to resentment, right? You hear that over and over again. You're like, okay, I can't expect anything of anyone. So be like, okay, I cannot expect my daughter to clean her room or I will get mad at her when she doesn't. That's not, we need to learn how to deal with the resentment and deal with the disappointment and deal with having our boundaries crossed. Like we have to learn how to deal with the uncomfortable emotion. We can't avoid them forever. And for a long time, I was like, oh, I just expect nothing of anyone and I won't have to deal with any uncomfortable emotions. And it literally doesn't work that way. Like I tried really hard for a while.
I agree with that completely. I mean, and I think it comes back to one of the root causes of how we see anger manifest in, those cliche ways. And that is expectation, which is sort of a proxy for control, really. So it's not really the problem that we can't or shouldn't expect anything, out of our lives or from certain people in our lives, but it's our internal expectation and understanding and acceptance of our ability to control that outcome and the opportunity or the possibility that we may not have control over that outcome. And the more we can accept that, the better I think we can deal with anger.
Definitely.
I think there's a difference
Well,
there. You can have you don't have to have expectation of outcome.
Yeah, that's exactly what I mean. You have
So
to
if
be
we
understanding
remove
you don't have
expectation
control
of
over it.
outcome just straight up, there's also like a freeing of resentment there.
well, and the hard part, right, is as we talked a little before we went live, I changed professions, and my change of professions, I'm now a supervisor. I have an expectation of employees, and when
Mhm.
they don't feel that, then I'm upset. I'm generally upset. Now, I think there's a big difference, and we keep hearing the terminology thrown around, right? React, react, react. In recovery, I don't react the way I respond today. And
Mhm.
we use the acronym SOBER, right? You know, and the last portion of sober, to stay sober, is to stop, observe what's going on, to look at our rational beliefs in that, to expound on, to see if there's any external things that are going on in other people's lives, and then to respond, not to react, to respond. Two different things. And if we learn how to respond to our anger rather than react in anger, it's it's a game changer in your life. I know it has been in mine. I can't say it's for everyone, but I know it has in mine, to respond to my anger rather than react in anger. And I think that's the huge difference between addiction and just early life and recovery, as I learned it later on.
Mm-hmm. So you're talking about, I've heard the phrase a few times lately, a meta moment. It's the pause, right? And I think
Right.
that's such a good word for it. And I've learned actually a little bit of I want to say like neuroscience behind this, but our reaction is the lizard brain, the amygdala, I think it is, that that's your fight or flight. That's your survival mechanisms. That's the same part of your brain that tells you to move your hand off the stove when you put your hand on a hot stove. Like it's an instant reaction, right? And so when we feel something that makes us feel threatened, we get angry. And we respond immediately. And it all happens so fast. And that's where Mike was talking earlier about you either go into hyper arousal or hypo arousal. You either fight or flight. And it all just happens so instantly. You're not thinking about it. You're just doing it. So you're either going to go into rage and you're going to beat the crap out of somebody, or you're going to completely shut down and shut down all of your systems and go into almost paralysis, right? So that's your amygdala, and it happens like immediately when you feel a threat. So that's when your boundary is crossed, when you got yelled at, when you got disrespected, when you felt disappointed. It happens automatically. If you can take the meta moment and pause, your prefrontal cortex will actually catch up. And that's the part of your brain that processes the situation. And then you're like, oh, so then that's where, you get into the SOBER acronym, Lester, where you can think about the actual things that are happening in the situation. And then you can formulate a response instead of just that instantaneous reaction. And to me, it's so helpful if you can feel anger, right? It's instant, it's physiological, like your body gets hot, and you're like, for me, like I'll even start like getting tunnel vision, and I'll start sweating, and like your heart starts racing, and you can feel it. And as soon as you can feel it, if you can be like, whoo, this is anger. Okay, I'm going to give like my actual brain a minute to catch up so we can decide what we're going to do about this, instead of just letting your like lizard brain, I hate that term, but that's what everybody says. So anyway, but without letting that part of your brain just take over. And there's so much power in remembering that if you can just give it a little bit of time to catch up, your conscious thinking, rational brain will catch up, and then you can start problem solving instead of just going into survival mode.
The other crazy thing about that too is you can actually feel anger in your body before, most of the time, like before we actually get to the point of expressing it. Like it's already turned in. You can feel that. You can feel the boil start coming up. Somebody's like pressing your button and pressing your button and then pressing your button, and you're like, okay, dude, are you done pressing the button? Then he turns the knob, and you're like, fuck you. And then he's like, here's the next radio station, and then crack. I mean, it's you can feel that tension just build and just build. And
most of us wait way too long
Mm-hmm.
after we start feeling that to do anything about it. And then we hit that point of rage or shutdown. Yeah.
That's exactly what I was going to say. It's like we're talking about these somatic responses, and I think that is really, really important to pay attention to with all of our emotions, because they can all be dealt with, acted on positively to meet our needs, or they can be ignored or acted on negatively in a way that either ignores our needs or works directly against them. And I think anger is one of those like keystone emotions, because like Julie, you're talking about like with our limbic system or the lizard brain, like one of the ways in which we see that most evinced is anger, because it's fight, right? Anger looks like fight for many people. The way Lester's talking about, the way he came up, like that's the way it sounds to me, is that, limbic system threatened, safety and security threatened, fight, flight, freeze, fight. This is anger. Got to show it. This is how it's evinced. And I think what's been really helpful to me is like from like a cognitive behavior like standpoint to think about it in those steps. Like you talked about slowing it down. And that's when I think about it in terms of like trigger, analysis, appraisal, reaction.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that might seem like really robotic to some people, and it might have seemed that way to me even at some point in my life, but through practice, it's become pretty natural for me, I think, and I found that to be very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
What were you going to say, Lester?
Growing up, I was taught to react to it, and it just became a steady, through everything, through practice, we become just reactionary to things. It just happens now. Through my recovery journey, I actually was involved in a program that started out as a therapeutic community, and one of the things that they do in there, and I pay, the utmost respect to the people who taught me this, it was REBT, and it's rational emotive behavioral therapy. And I thought it was the stupidest thing when I first got into it. I fought it with everything I had, but after countless, I would run into a situation and I would have to sit down and journal about it. And it was just that, the activating event, the irrational beliefs turned into the consequences from that reaction. Then we would go into disputing those, how we can turn those into better beliefs, disputing those irrational beliefs, turn them into positive beliefs, and then using them as a corrective action. And I know we're going to discuss this in a minute, but how do we turn those beliefs and those feelings into actions, right? And how can we'll discuss this in a little bit, but how does anger become a positive build up in you? How can you use it to help you? There is some positive aspects to anger, and when you can learn how to tap into them, it's going to be eye opening. And I've got a couple examples, but I just think that it was the stupidest thing, and I went through hundreds of journals to where it became I no longer had to think about it. I no longer had to stop and say, okay, why do I need to behave this way? It became a natural progression into, I don't have to stop and think about it. I know when I get angry, I know the things that stop me, and I just move about my business now, and I never get to that point where I'm just the Hulk and rip everything off and throw things.
It's rewiring the habit, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And
right.
we do that in addiction. We rewire our habits.
Oh, big time. Big time.
So
Using
that was-
anger. Go ahead, Julie.
I was just going to say, the next thing I was going to ask is, in what ways has anger actually been helpful or useful to you? Because I think we've talked a lot about what it feels like and how it shows up for us and what that looks like. But, we've got listeners out there who are like, okay, great, I understand it, but what am I supposed to do with it now? Like, now that I understand why I'm feeling anger, and we're all in agreement that we have to let ourselves feel it and we have to respond carefully to it. How has anger been helpful or useful or generally positive for you in your life?
Anger has been an incredibly positive force in my life. Generally, it started out with me being angry at me for not doing the thing I knew was good for me, or avoiding something that was fearful, that I was afraid of, to the point where I would do other unhealthy things just to avoid doing the thing I knew I had to do. I literally got to the point of being extremely angry at myself, and then I would turn around and say, fuck it. Now it's time to go and face this thing, because I'm tired of it ruling and being a determinant factor of how I'm going to act and react in my life. Quitting my job. How many times? Like, I had a great job. Made over $100,000 a year. I was doing great in life. I was miserable. And every 2 or 3 months, I would have a breakdown about this very thing. And what I would do was I'd have like a 3-day bout of depression over it. I'd cry like a baby a bunch of times, and then I would pull myself back out of it. And then 2 weeks, like at the end of that week, I would be back figuring out and how to give myself a fresh new perspective and on the same fucking pig that it was. And it was the same pig. It tasted the same. Like, it didn't taste like bacon, let me tell you. It was rolling in shit. So I went through this over and over and over again, to the point where I was like, I remember sitting on the outside talking to Julie on the phone back behind the storage tanks. And I think this was one of those moments where I was just like, I can't do this anymore. I cannot continue to put myself through this same suffering over and over and over again. It's my choice. This is a choice I'm choosing to make. I need to do something different. And in tears and absolute anger at myself, I turned around and said, okay, fine. I'm just gonna go and do it. What are you gonna do after? I have no idea. But now I'm done feeling this way. I'm done putting myself through this sort of anguish. It was the anger at the lack of self-respect that I was treating myself with, where I've turned around, and I've done this multiple times, wondering why I have to put myself through so much pain to make progress. And it's always been the anger that has been the catalyst to flipping that whole thing and creating action behind it. Every time it's always been the anger at the fact that I've abandoned myself so much.
That's such a good example.
What's
Sorry,
that?
I was just saying that's fucking such a good example of like what Julie was asking, of like how to be used as a positive, or examples in which it's been used as a positive emotion for you. For you, as someone who it sounds like has more repressive tendencies toward your anger, or at least they're repressively turned inward. That led you, again, like we've talked about, as a secondary emotion, as an emotion of avoidance. Anger built up to the point where it actually made you take action, which is the point of emotions in general. They're to signal our needs so we can make corresponding actions. So I just think that's an awesome example, dude.
Yeah, agreed.
Anger has always been, and it seems, especially in recovery, anger is always seems to be the emotion that gets me past fear.
Interesting.
Anger is the
it's
driving force for change.
Mhm.
I really think that it's one of the most powerful things about anger is that it's the driving force for change. What about you, Lester? You said you had a couple of examples of how anger's actually been positive in your life.
Yeah, similar to what you were just saying. It's a motivating force for change, right? Um, had I been taught early in life how to encompass anger and use it in a positive manner, I think my life would look a lot different today. But learning that and being able to take it and use it as a motivating factor, whether it's naysayers, whether it's a disappointment to your family, whether it's whatever it is, I you know I can use it to motivate myself to push through uncomfortable situations, whether it's changing my career, whether it's you guys know I'm a big fitness fanatic, and part of that is I achieve personal records on days I'm angry. I just go in there and I just throw some weight around, or I run a little harder that day, or I express it in a different light today than I have historically in my past. I don't express it in I don't need to put someone else down or yell at them or beat them up to express anger today. I just let me show you. That's my biggest thing. You doubt me, let me show you. I don't get angry at it. I don't get upset. I don't. Now it's just I have to prove to myself and others that I can accomplish the things that I haven't had an opportunity to accomplish because of my history, and so I genuinely utilize it today as a motivating force. I spoke of REBT, and one of the things is how can you utilize it to change your perception of things? And I do it all the time, and now I get to express it in a different light today. I have the emotional intelligence. Me and Steve briefly touched on this a couple days ago to sit down and have a discussion about my anger, to express to someone how I feel today and change the way they treat me. It's a good boundary maker today. I can be angry because you're not treating me the way I think I should be treated, and that now I can speak about it. And you know, it 9 times out of 10, it changes someone else, the way someone else treats me. Just having that conversation. So
I'll play on that a little bit. For me, I think the biggest positive part of anger in my life has been learning to speak up, like you're talking about, Lester. Um, for me, speaking up for myself ever was just not something I did. It was terrifying to me. I didn't want to make anybody mad. I didn't want to disappoint anyone. I didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings. So I just accepted a lot more than I ever should have. Um, Nowadays, and I mean, I'll probably have to work on this forever, but nowadays I do speak up for myself. And like assertive communication is something I'm actively working on practicing. But every time I do, I feel better about myself. And probably my biggest struggle in all of my life and the most powerful part of recovery for me has been self-worth. I never felt good about myself. I always felt like I wasn't good enough. Starting as a little girl, I can remember feeling that way. And I carried that with me up until I was almost 40 years old. And building self-worth has been the most important, most powerful part of recovery for me. And being able to speak up when I'm starting to feel angry, or being able to speak up when boundaries are crossed or when I'm being mistreated or whatever, has given me a sense of self-worth that I was sorely lacking for most of my life.
The common thread that I'm hearing between what all of us are saying is that anger is inseparable, really, from fear. And one of the many ways in which it can be beneficial to use it as an emotional cue to act on a need, is to be able to break through that fear. Because like I like use this model with clients a lot. I talk about like a tree, like the tree is fear and the different branches off the tree. One is avoidance, and like what are all the different little branches off of avoidance? And one of them that I see so commonly is anger. Again, because it's more accessible than some other feelings that may be more vulnerable to certain people. And what all of you guys are saying is that like anger has, like Steve called it, a catalyst, has brought you to a point of actually affecting behavioral change. And when we confront fear with action, that's courage, right? That's, I like to think about that as courage. And when we confront fear with avoidance,
It's not
I don't want
courage.
to say that's cowardice, but it's not helpful.
It's not courage.
Right.
So how do you use anger to benefit you?
Man, I was thinking about this while you guys were talking. I mean, I would say in some similar ways. For me, I don't know that it's been as, and this is why I came to this conversation saying I was really open to exploring the ways that anger has affected me, because I genuinely mean that. I don't think that it's affected me or affects me or plays a role as directly as a motivator. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. Growing up, and again, like just how I was conditioned, I don't know, maybe it's somewhere between Steve and Lester and all you guys. Like, I don't know. I was not afraid to get angry and pop off. Like, I definitely had my, share of like violent encounters as a result of anger and things like that. So I don't know that it is a motivator to the point of getting me to act on something that I was previously avoiding. But I think what it does is, okay, you know what? I'm kind of coming to the realization as I'm speaking through this right now. I think what it really does is make me confront the root of it. And again, as Lester said very early on, as it being a secondary emotion, I think that's often what it is for me, is an emotion that's just more accessible. And if I get down to it, if I'm thinking about, like, let's say an interpersonal relationship in which I feel like I'm being very let down by someone. Let's call that like an inextricable interpersonal relationship too, not something I can just walk away from.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me really confront the reasons for why I feel that way. And even if I cannot walk away from it in the way that it's a catalyst and some of these other things, like walk away from your job, Steve, is a good proxy. But even if I can't do it that same way, I can still reevaluate, all right, what's actually in my control here? And how can I live with this and best manage it to make the most of this relationship to which I am tied? Really,
So, but what you're saying right there is you're getting down to the root of it, and then you're asking yourself, okay, what am I in control of? What actions can I take?
yes.
So still, anger is a catalyst for action, even as you're saying that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, Joey.
Mm-hmm.
Just it ends up being a catalyst to action one way or another. I mean, you can avoid it until all you want. That shit comes back, man. It comes back around. There'll be another experience we have in our lives that will reflect that same experience that got me angry that I avoided facing.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. Oh
Right?
yeah.
Like,
You know, I was thinking, and I feel like in my history, I've used anger as emotional avoidance.
Yes.
For sure.
I ran away from everything and disguised it in anger. I remember when my grandmother passed, the hurt that I felt deep down. And as a man, I'm told I can't express that. It was easier to go find uh, a fist fight, right? Because I know a black eye heals, but I didn't know when my heart was going to heal. So
Mhm.
I find it in that manner. Same with if I a fight with a girlfriend, I go to a bar and find a fist fight because I felt like my heart, I didn't understand that hurt. I knew physical hurt, I knew physical anger. I was comfortable with it.
Yeah.
Where, you know, I wasn't comfortable with feeling hurt. So I think today in understanding anger, it just for me it's truly that secondary emotion. When it does creep up, it just means that there's something that I'm trying to avoid or trying to deal with that I need to find out how to deal with it. And
Mhm.
it's just easier to be angry at it.
Yeah.
So I think
I love what
that's
Mike
the
says
hardest
though.
thing.
It's like it's more accessible.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely.
Right. It's something you're familiar with. You know what to do with it. You know how to express that. It's really accessible. It's better than accessing the pain because you have an outlet for it, one that you've taught yourself. I think we all do this in our own special way, right? Like hit anger, and then the habit or belief system associated with the anger, and then use it in that way. And what we've done now in recovery is take that, analyze it, because a lot of everything in recovery is an analyzation of how am I feeling in this instance? What am I going to do differently this time? Because my previous coping mechanisms clearly sucked.
Right.
Well, and I hate to say it, but hell, I used anger as an excuse to use
Oh, for
to
sure.
drink.
Yep.
Yeah, you know, it was
Absolutely.
Yeah.
gone. Oh, I'm
Yeah.
mad. I'm drinking.
Yep.
Give me a shot. You know,
Oh, yeah.
it was just an excuse at that point. And now without that, now it's I got to sit in it sometimes and decipher it, and that's as hard as it is, I feel lucky to be able to do that today. I
Mm-hmm.
get to decipher my anger today rather than running from it or hiding or letting it control my life for what I do. It doesn't control it anymore. It motivates me, yes, but it doesn't control who I am today. So
Definitely.
I think this is
And
Yeah, I
very,
was
very good.
thinking how when you were saying earlier, Lester, like talking about just it's the expression of it in terms of like violence or rage, and I was kind of getting back in touch with I'm 40 now, so yeah, I'm like old, I guess. And I was thinking back to when I
I
was.
think you're the youngest one here still.
I think so.
For real? Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh God, yes. All right.
Yeah.
I just
I'm
busted
for
out a
real,
middle
real?
finger
so-
on a podcast. I was like, what?
Please do.
Die! I turned 44 at the end of this month, or at the end of this year.
I've gotten so accustomed to being like, I don't
The
know,
old guy?
reminded of that I'm older than everyone else. And I'm like, oh yeah, I'm not as young as you guys. Like,
All right, you're turning 45. You're the old one.
That's just what we're calling it now.
I just experienced some mild anger.
let it out, Steve. Drive to Florida. Like earlier I was talking about how just acting on whether it's anger or any emotions, they can, at best be kind of a neutral influence or which is really negative, which is a lack of advancing our actual needs in terms of being, act on whatever the emotion is, let's say anger in this case. Or at worst, they can actually work directly against them. And that's like what Lester was just talking about as an excuse for using, I think was a really, really good example of that, when it literally undermines, when the avoidance of dealing with that emotion actually undermines our explicit interests. Like, it just defies logic. And I don't know, that's one of the great things about recovery, is being able to analyze it with a little bit more of a bird's eye view and see that logic.
For sure. Yeah, no, I love that. I completely agree. So we are reaching a point where we should probably wrap this up. I feel like we could actually probably keep this conversation going way longer, but we're reaching our hour mark. So I'm gonna wrap up by asking everybody one last question. What would you say to someone who is afraid to feel or experience anger?
I'll kick it off if you want.
Yeah.
Now my answer will be the worst because I'm going first, but and I'll hear yours and then want to expound upon it. I would ask that person, are you afraid to feel joy? Are you afraid to feel, I can get my little emotional wheel right here. That's my mouse pad. I'm sure you are all familiar with.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Are you afraid to feel sad? Are you afraid to feel happy? All these things. I'm not an absolutist person. I'm very much not black and white in my thinking, but in terms of my approach and my acceptance of the way I need to deal with emotions, I would say there are some hard values to which I stick in that area. And one of those is the intentionality around recognizing emotion, whether it's from a somatic response like getting hot in my body with anger, or it's, feel a little flutter in my chest because I see my daughter smile at me or whatever, and it makes me choked up. I'm going to let those tears go. The same way I'm going to let that anger go. I'm going to actually allow myself to feel it, because I know physiologically, psychologically, that is the best thing for me to do. And that's just something I've learned in recovery.
Absolutely. What about you, Lester? What would you say to someone who's afraid of feeling anger?
Being in recovery, the hardest part is feeling anything. And as scary as it can be, it can also be liberating. It can also be something that motivates. If we rob ourselves of the ability to feel anger or joy or sadness, or we're doing ourselves an injustice. And I think the biggest part of recovery is we are here to give back to ourselves, to become the people that we have forgotten or never been in our lives. And if we rob ourselves of any emotion or any feeling in this life, we're just doing ourselves an injustice. And I think it's really an important step to be able to feel, even if we don't understand it, even if we have to put it away till a later time, just feeling it. We don't have to solve it. We don't have to rectify the problem, but if we allow ourselves to feel it, we we get to know ourselves a little better in that moment. So I think it's important that we do.
Anger was always something that you weren't supposed to feel in my world. And I was raised, in a very conservative religious household. And again, so anger was even made out as to be a sinful emotion. You were not supposed to feel it. So for me, being afraid to feel anger made me feel like that made me a bad person. And it made me feel like I was doing something I wasn't supposed to do. I think giving ourselves permission to feel every single emotion and understanding their feelings, they will pass. You don't have to do anything to make a feeling pass. It will do it on its own. I was convinced I had to drink in order to make an emotion pass. It took longer than it should have for me to realize that emotions will pass on their own. And you do have control over how you choose to respond to your emotions. You always have control over how you respond.
They really do have a limited life expectancy, don't they?
Emotions, yeah, it's usually longer than I want them to be, but
I mean,
but they don't live forever.
They feel so big and they feel so permanent in the moment, though, right? And then it's uncomfortable, so we just want it to go away. And I think one of the hardest things to do is allow myself to feel it without the expectation of permanency. And so to answer this question, I think, like, what is that anger trying to tell you? What is it you're afraid to do? In a lot of what we talked about, the anger came from a fear of something, fear of doing something, not taking an action. And I was angry because I was afraid of, if I did the thing, some change would happen that I didn't want to deal with the outcome of. And so I would avoid it, because dealing with the outcome of the change was what the fear was, where the anger came from. So what was it trying to tell you, and what are you afraid to do? Because you can action your way out of anger if you figure out a healthy way to express it. So I want to say thank you, Mike, and thank you, Lester. I appreciate you two showing up and sharing your hearts and your thoughts on anger. So nice to see you guys again. Looking forward to maybe having a coffee sometime, Lester. And
Of course.
it's a pleasure, as always, guys. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you,
Really,
guys.
really enjoyed talking to you, as always.
Yeah. Likewise. Thank you guys so much.